Hi, welcome to Road to Vostok feature highlight number 1. These feature highlights are basically straight to the point, quite minimal showcases from the commercial brands. These are recorded at one take, so I can minimize the editing time and maximize the development time for the early access production. So if there's some mistakes or issues here and there, that's the reason why. So these are recorded at one take. This feature highlight is focused on the UI overhaul. Basically, I upgraded the entire inventory system to so-called inventory Tetris, and there's quite a lot of cool things related to that. But first, let's start by quickly checking out how the old system looked like in terms of inventory grids and so on. Okay, so this was the old inventory and interface from the demo branch. This old approach was based on this one tile per item approach, meaning one item took one tile from the inventory or container, no matter what the item type or category was. There was some variations, for example, when you equipped some items like weapons, but that was pretty much it. Not visually that interesting and probably not the preferred way for most players in this genre. So let's return to the overhauled UI and let's see what has changed. This is the new interface and UI for the commercial branch, meaning the upcoming early access version of the game. Don't mind the background, that's there for just this debug build that I'm using to test this new system. But the main improvement is that now items are based on this multi-tile approach. For example, when I pick up items, the size on the grid is based on the Tetris size of the item, so they take different amount of grid space based on the item size. There's also this sorting algorithm, which is kind of the core part of the system. For example, when you go to the traders or loot some containers, the sorting algorithm makes sure that every item is aligned and it works quite efficiently with the grids. Then let's start by going through the basic functionalities of this new system. This new system is based on this drag and drop approach, meaning when I hold down the left mouse button, the item will get dragged, and when I release it, the item will get dropped to the grid. I can rotate the items, and the highlight system updates dynamically between the rotations. If I try to place the item to so-called invalid position, which is highlighted in red, the item will get returned to its original rotation and original position. If I try to drag an item outside of the grid, the system automatically detects that as a drop, so it will drop the item to the game world and so on. Here's some fiddling around with different rotations. So pretty familiar stuff for people who have used this type of inventory before. Then let's look at equipping items and unequipping items. The system works in multiple ways. The basic way is that, like in the demo branch, you can drag items to their position. The scale of the item will change based on the slot type that you are trying to occupy with the item. Let's place few items to the equipment. There's primary, secondary knife, helmet, rigs, backpacks, apparel, and then these utility items. Let's drag, for example, the boots there also. This is the basic approach for equipping and unequipping items. Let's make some space here. So quite similar like in the previous build, the demo branch, but there's few new things that are related, for example, character previews. If I want to see my character, meaning what equipment has been placed on the character, the preview buttons are up here. So for example, now when I place the rig, I don't see anything, but if I switch to these different modes, now I can visualize the character in this character preview. There's multiple different methods of visualizing. For example, this is hide, this is show, this is blend. For example, now the character preview is blended with the slots, and then we have this dark mode, which only shows the dark silhouette of the character. So that's basically the basics of equipping and unequipping items. Okay, so next we have so-called grid abilities. These are just fancy development words. You don't have to use these words, but basically these are kind of special abilities that you can do with these Tetris grids. Let's spawn some items there, and let's start with so-called grid swap. This means that when you have similar sized Tetris items in your grid, you can swap those positions. No matter what the rotation is, the swap works correctly. Even though some items by default are different shape, but if they occupy the same amount of Tetris space, you can swap those items in the grid. Let's, for example, swap these. Let's swap these. Maybe rotate this to this, swap these, and so on. And this is pretty useful when you have when you want to organize your grid. For example, if I want all silencers to this part of the grid, I can easily swap these, so I don't have to fiddle around by removing some items first and so on. So that was called grid swap. The next is slot swap. Same idea, but within the slots we need some same slot items. For example, here we have two weapons. When I equip the first weapon, I can slot swap the weapons between. This works. Within the slots, I can switch between primary and secondary, and so on. So that's called slot swap. Works also with the rigs, clothes, and all the other equipment. Then we have these fast abilities. We can fast drop. Now I'm holding down shift, so it fast drops the item, so I don't have to drag it outside of the grid. Then I have fast transfer. By holding down control, I can quickly transfer between grids. And finally, we have fast equip. By holding down Alt, I can fast equip these items to the equipment, and so on. So those were the main grid abilities. Next we have item combining, and this is pretty new to the previous build, so there's a few things that I want to cover here. Let's first spawn some items. The first thing that I want to mention is that now there's so-called dynamic items, meaning in the previous build, the demo branch, the items for these grid elements were static, meaning one image file per item, but now they can utilize multiple images within one icon. Let's, for example, use this weapon here. The dynamic item, for example, with the weapons, works that it showcases the attachments that you are combining with the item. Let's, for example, take one suppressor. Maybe we try to get some scopes. There's one, there's two. And when I drag the item on top of some combined target, there's this highlight gear icon that shows that item can be combined to this item that I'm dragging on top of. When I release the mouse, the icon gets updated. Now you can see that there's a suppressor. The rotation still works correctly, and I can update the item icon by this, meaning combining items. Do we have a magazine here? Not yet. Now we have. And yes, the magazines are now a separate item. That's going to introduce a lot of gameplay changes, but I'm going to talk about those later on. If I want to remove these combined items, I can use the context menu by right-clicking. I can see all the combined items, meaning attachments here, and just by clicking I can remove the items and the dynamic item changes accordingly. This works also within the equipment. When I combine items, the equipment slot dynamically updates and so on. There's also these combine swaps. For example, if I'm trying to swap for example, this optic here, it will replace the dynamic icon with the new combined item and return the old one here. So that's basically the combine system for weapons. Then let's look at combining other types of items. We can start by using these rigs, for example. Now I'm going to need medical items there and some patches. I think these are, and also armor plate. Here's one. So The weapon combining worked with the attachments, and for example the rig can take other types of items than attachments. The most obvious one is the armor plates. That doesn't visually change the dynamic icon, but it showcases these item details that there's an armor plate stored within the rig. I can remove that. Then the new things are that I already briefly mentioned in the previous devlog, that I can attach different medical items to the rigs, which will give you the ability to use these hotkeys for using the medical items, so you don't have to open the interface in order to use these. I can swap these. Currently, rigs can only hold one medical item combined, but in the future there's going to be multiple slots for different kind of medical items. Then there was these achievement badges that you can claim by completing some of the game achievements, and those will be attached to the Velcro surfaces of these items. Not just rigs. For example, if I have this belt pouch here that has a Velcro surface, I can attach the badge there. And those combined items will remain whether I have the equipment on the grid or in the equipment slot. So that's combining items other than weapons. Last element related to combining is ammunition and magazines. For this purpose, let's take not this weapon. Here's the right one. So now we have weapon compatible magazine and few ammunition boxes. The combining with the ammunition works by stacking those, so the number of the rounds will get multiplied when you stack. I can split those. If I have a big stack here, I can take just the default box amount, and when these magazines are now separate items, meaning I can combine and remove those, the ammunition loading happens by tracking compatible ammunition to the magazine, and then there's this audio cycle that rounds each round to the magazine. Now there's 30 rounds loaded in the magazine. When I equip the magazine, I combine the magazine to the weapon, I can see the amount of rounds updated here. I remove the magazine, I unload the magazine, and now I have those rounds separated here. There's going to be some changes, or at least game settings related to that loading sound, because that might get a bit annoying after you are loading a lot of magazines. So there might be some options that you have this one loading sound, for example, instead of that continuous load audio cycle. But that's combining or stacking ammunition, unloading, loading ammunition to the magazines, and so on. And that was pretty much the UI overhaul that I wanted to showcase with this first feature highlight. I basically had to rewrite this entire interface system, but I'm pretty happy with the end result, and we also tested this on Patreon, and it should work quite reliably. Before ending this video, I'm going to do some general Tetris fiddling here with some background music, so I'm going to return with voiceover just a bit, so stay tuned. Thanks for checking out this first feature highlight and update from the commercial branch. I have actually a lot of these feature highlights coming up quite early this year. One of those is related to shelter customization and multi-shelter support, which is a big part of that commercial branch. One of those is related to grenades. One of those is related to dynamic game time. and so on. So lots of cool stuff is coming up. Lastly, I want to mention that this commercial branch production had quite a good start of or kickstart early this year, and that was mostly because of the support patch sales and support patch in general. So thanks for everyone who have maybe considered or purchased that patch. That really helped the production because I can outsource a lot of tasks with contractors, so that's a big help. If you're still interested, there's few more of those remaining before those get sold out. There's a link in the description for the support patch. And once again, thanks for checking out this first feature highlight video, and we will see in the next video.